Hey, I'm Jasper, and welcome to Aliens Love Earth, the platform where we heal the Earth with art. First of all, Happy New Year. I really hope you had a beautiful time over the holidays, whether that was with family, friends, chosen family, or maybe just quiet time with yourself. And if you didn't really celebrate, that's okay too, of course. For me, the end of a year and the beginning of a new one is always a moment to pause, to look back, to reflect, and also to gently look forward to the things that are gonna come in the next year. So in today's episode, we're doing exactly that. We'll look back on some of our favorite moments and insights from last year, share what we're looking forward to building together in the year ahead, and a little later in this episode, we'll review something really important about the impact you helped create simply by being here. Just so you know, during each segment, you'll find a link to the full conversation at the top of the video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the description if you're listening to the audio-only version. So if something really resonates with you, you can easily dive deeper. But before we dive into the interview highlights, let's rewind for a little moment. Last year, we shared 11 in-depth interviews here on Aliens Love Earth. 11 interviews with artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, creators, all exploring in their own way how art, nature, and the human experience are actually deeply connected. And besides that, through our Community Tracks podcasts and our blog features, we also supported over 150 unique indie artists by sharing their music, their stories, highlighting their new albums or EPs. So yeah, we're really excited about that. But the next thing really blew my mind, because on the audio podcast side of things, we reached a really big milestone because we passed 1,000 downloads on our podcast. And yeah, we're really thankful for that. It's also really cool to see that people are really listening from all over the world. Actually, the podcast was listened to from 33 unique countries, with special shout outs to New Zealand, Germany, Australia, the United States, and the Netherlands. We also feel really at home on YouTube because our interviews reached people in 35 countries there, with some special love for the US, the Netherlands, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Portugal. It's really exciting to me to see that you are really listening from everywhere over the world. So it's great to have you here. I'm happy that you're hanging around as well. And yeah, before we dive deeper into the interview highlights, I'm also curious, and I have a question for you. And that is, what is one insight that you yourself gained over the last year that genuinely shifted how you look at the world? And what's something that you're really excited for that's coming in this next year? Yeah, make sure to let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely excited to hear from you. And yeah, I'll make sure to get back to your comment as well. And now I think it's about time that we dive into some of the highlights of the interviews from last year. So the first one is actually also the first interview that we shared last year, and it was an interview with Wolf Kingsman. And we kicked it off in probably the most beautiful surrounding that we ever recorded an interview in, was in Laos with the backdrop of the mountains right there. And I actually asked Wolf how he feels that art and nature are connected. And yeah, some way that question opened the door into a conversation that went far beyond music, and way more into presence, reverence, and also listening to the world around us and what we can learn from it. So let's dive into that moment for a second.
I mean, this thing was made to be played in nature. It's made out of nature. It's made out of wood.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, when we spend time in nature, we get back to our nature. And then I've read something recently, and I think you'd like it. But it was like a leopard's roar is different than every other leopard's roar. A leopard's roar they have a distinctive roar that's different from any other leopard. So that's how I think about
like a fingerprint.
Yeah, fingerprint. And that's how I think about music and nature, right? So it's like, I think when we try to play someone else's music, if it's not our own music, then we're not getting into our roar, you know? So we want to like find that natural roar within ourselves. So music helps us connect back with nature. If we get back within our own nature, then we're going to harmoniously, naturally live with nature, right? So we're going to do things that benefit nature and just go hand in hand, intertwined, without even having to do a bunch of research. And just like feeling, hey, this place doesn't feel right, or I don't want to support like this. Like it's just naturally going to come out, like without even,
less
thinking
in the
about it.
head, like
Yeah, less in the
spend
head.
less time in the head and more like in the feeling and
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I think the music intertwines, right? So
Yeah.
that intuitive
It makes sense for
natural
you
instinct.
then also that it connects with your yoga practice and your
Yeah.
breath work and other self-consciousness practices that you know, are interested
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we're supposed to have multiple arts to practice.
Mm.
Like that's just how I feel. I feel like yeah, when we practice multiple things, we get into different places within ourselves.
Mm.
So like if I just meditated, that would get me into a place within myself. If I just played the flute, if I do all these things, that's how I really get to really feel into different aspects of myself, you know? So by practicing different art forms,
Mm.
gets me into my natural way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes you rather than
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. Instead of like if I just identified as one thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just
I'm
this.
a yoga teacher.
Yeah, like,
I'm
yeah, like,
yeah.
or I'm just a musician or whatever, man.
Yeah.
It's like, and then all of a sudden, it's like now you're being defined by yourself. You have this definition, and other people have a definition for it. But
Yeah.
if again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, if you're just trying to be yourself, and then why are you? There's no competition, you know?
Wolf is more than
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, yeah, I mean, I feel like we're all just awareness. And then these are just our vehicles and they got names. They have a story, you
Yeah.
know? And yeah, I feel I'm getting a little deep out here, but
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I like that.
You know, I feel like
That's the real reason why I do the talks because I just find it great to like
sweet.
learn and hear from people like how
Yeah.
they yeah.
Yeah. I feel like before we were in these bodies, we were awareness in some form. I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe some people do know,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. And then I came into this body and I'm awareness in this body now. And what happens after, I know I'll just be some type of awareness and I don't know in what form,
Mm.
but I can count on my awareness being there, you know, so it's not going anywhere.
Mm.
So, yeah, like with art and stuff, I feel like that's that connection of like, it's almost like you're this awareness of self, right? You're just expressing it out.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wolf, for that super interesting conversation. I can really recommend you check out the full interview. It's besides the deep talk, it's also really cool to hear him play this Native American flute that I was lucky enough to hear quite often when I was volunteering there. So yeah, thanks so much, Wolf. And the next clip also is something that really stuck with me ever since I had the conversation with Caminata. And one sentence that really still lives with me ever since we had the talk is that he said, intention is everything. And we talked about uncertainty, about not knowing where to move next in life. And somehow that led us to some pretty existential reflections, like what are the odds of us being here right now? That's a part of a conversation that I really would like to share with you. So here's a part of the talk with Caminata.
Intention. I think that it all comes from your intention. Even if you're creating popular music or mainstream music, what's the point of being rich or having millions of streams and euros and all this fame if you're not connecting and if you're not helping others? So looking into from my perspective, I used to do music that was about my pain and a bit of my suffering, and now it changed from, okay, why do I want to speak about myself if I can do music to help other people? What kind of energy am I putting out there? And that will come back to me at some point. And I feel like if people are lost and they don't know what to do in their lives and they feel which direction to go, just stop a bit, think, what are your intentions in this world as a human being?
Beautiful. Yeah. Now that we're talking on attention, actually, I made a quick note on something that I read on your Bandcamp profile.
Okay.
You wrote there, "I am love, I am life, I am the expression of everything and nothing. I am positive, I am energy, I solely yet utterly am." It's all almost meditative, or like a,
Mm.
how do you say it? Like a kind of a mantra or something you tell
Uh-huh.
yourself in some way. So I'm just curious, like, what does that line mean to you, and yeah, how did it make its way on your profile, on your bio?
It's a way to remind myself of stop feeling sorry for myself, pretty much. Stop. There's so many things going in the world right now. Why my worries are nothing compared to everything going on in the world. And I have an opportunity. I have freedom. I live in a peaceful country. What will I do with this opportunity? Will I take advantage of it and use the tools that I have in my disposal, or will I cry about it and not do anything?
Hmm.
And leaving my house and really made me appreciate this freedom that I always had, but I never really appreciated. I always took it for granted in a way.
Hmm. Yeah. Does it help you then to like move and be in very different um, areas and surroundings and realize like that things can be very different elsewhere, or it was something else that like made you help with that insight?
No, I go outside. For example, I see a homeless person, uh, you know, and I think to myself, if I made a few different decisions in my life, that could be me in that position. You know, we live in with this idea that we are different, or that we don't need to help each other, or we should live for ourselves and for our family, which is good. But where do we live? We don't live in countries or cities. We live in one planet. We all live on the same planet, and we are existing at the same time, uh, at this exact same point. Even we having this conversation now, and the universe exists for millions of years. What's the odds of us being here now?
Yes, wow, thank you so much for sharing that insight with me, with us. It was a real pleasure to getting to know you this year, and or last year actually, and I really enjoyed having this conversation. So yeah, sometimes I ask questions in the interviews, and then the answers can be really surprising and really take a different direction into the chat that we're actually having. And that happened when I asked Incognito, if you look at the future of the natural world, what do you feel? And yeah, that question somehow turned into a very deeply moving conversation about awareness, recognizing your own needs, and then actually acting on them as well. Yeah, and to figure out how that connects to nature, let's just check out this highlight right now.
I think like as well as like actively doing things that, like there's no way to like perfectly do anything. But like being able to own your decisions by knowing the information that you take in and being able to choose what you do with that is just like a right of every person. And so to lean into that as much as possible, like it's only just a way to feel freer in making your own decisions with the information you know. But I would say like I like to think more about at the moment, not just like instead of, how can I actively go against this to stop this, like actually just connecting with what is already existing now. Like just the small things that are already around me, like I hear birds out of my window like every morning when I get up, and just like the small things that remind me of nature and what that feels like to me, to just like be aware of like my body and feeling less disconnected from myself and my surroundings. I feel like trickles of that build along the way into like finding wells of like deeper connection in other points later on, when being able to just stop and like acknowledge things on a smaller level that can like actually build to like bigger levels of being aware of just nature. I think awareness, like as a word, is just like great to acknowledge in like, especially in times of overwhelm, like having environmental anxiety or whatever, or just having information regurgitated down your throat, like being able to take a step back and not feel dictated by that information, but own it for yourself and what you want to choose to do with that instead of like push it and avoid it. Yeah, I would just say awareness, like, because there's always things I feel like I'm viewing differently in terms of like awareness of nature. Like you said, like sometimes it's through people and sometimes it is through the physical things of nature, of where your local park is, or like what other things that you didn't know existed in your area, that like can just feel like less, like, especially if you live in a city, like concrete like can be like gray is just the like color you see like on a regular basis, and you can be quite desensitized to nature in a lot of ways because of that, and to just know what's like in your area, like I guess I like to think about that too sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would like, if you would fit it into it like a tip or something, then it's like go out and try to consciously see what is around.
Go out and, okay, this is what I would say, maybe like, what are you acknowledging right now, and what does that make you want to connect more with in your area that's closer to you. So whether that's like, like personally, I really like being near water, but I'm not really like a sea person. I'm like more of a like lake or waterfall, and I've wanted to like go to like just like find a waterfall near me, um, like the closest one, and just go to it and just be around that. Like, what's that unique to you? What are you acknowledging right now? What does that bring you closer to in that respect?
So some of the talks really shift perspectives, I feel, and other talks are really interesting because they give you some tools or some actually very hands-on tips to deal with something. And then some conversations do both at the same time. And that happened when I talked with Juan Areche about doubt, in the broadest sense of the word, actually. We talked about creative doubt, personal doubt, and what he learned by moving through challenges in songwriting and in life is, very interesting to hear, not only for songwriters or for musicians, but for everyone actually living a life, which you probably are if you're watching this. So let's have a look and a listen to his takeaways, because they can be applied to pretty much every part of being human.
Well, number one, it's, I know it's cliche to say, but it's easier for us to doubt ourselves. And if we're wanting to work through a challenge and we think to ourselves, I can't, I think it's important for us to try. And by sitting and doing, we can do more things than our mind will tell us. I work as a therapist, so I work with people that can struggle with this, with the anxiety of the human condition. And I think it's very human for our brain to protect us from the unknown. And so I would say, hey, the unknown is worth exploring. You never know what you can find if you start to experiment with what you have at your disposal, something completely new. So sitting here and trying to have courage and belief in yourself, even if it's just a little bit, it can create more momentum as you start to write more. And that was my experience with it too. I found it to be very relieving at the end, because at first, initially starting it was kind of like, what the hell do I do? Like,
What am I doing?
what am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay, because I've heard this from various artists, is like, hey, have fun, make mistakes. And allow yourself to explore what's unknown. Don't even judge it. And then analyze it later. And my mentor taught me that too. He tells me that, but I read that from a lot of articles of other artists of their creative process. So I would say, like, definitely when you're exploring new things, have fun with it, make the mistakes, be bad at it intentionally. It's okay. And because nobody starts off really as like, oh, I know how to do this, like right off the bat, something brand new. So approaching it with that kind of courage and will really helps to break through the barrier.
Yes, and from our conversation about doubt, we jump to someone who made a decision and is not doubting that anymore, who is going by the name Lucid Letters. Because in our talk, she shared her decision to step away from the major social media platforms. Why she did it, how she's navigating it, and what it opened up for her, creatively and mentally. Really interesting conversation if you're also sometimes doubting how fun it actually still is.
Yeah, it's been a struggle especially when you're afraid to disappoint people that you care about, or even just disappoint anyone. You can end up really kind of crushing down your intuition, but eventually it's going to come out, it's going to pop up. And I think many people during the harder times in lockdown were, assessing how they really felt about things. And it came up to the front very quickly for me, like, I need to make some changes here. But in the case of moving away from the major social media platforms, which I'm still in the process of, I'm not doing it kind of cold turkey. Like, I need to, let people know that's what I'm doing. I want to be able to stay in contact with the people that I found there. It was much more about, yes, I was having a negative feeling around it, and it was wasting a lot of my time and taking away from my ability to make the things I wanted to make. Yes, those were true. But also the larger landscape of it's becoming less and less of a safe place for the kinds of communities I care about. It's becoming more and more politicized and become more of a tool for propaganda of all kinds. And then when there was the fiasco of people being forcibly followed to political accounts they had no contact with before.
That was really wild,
in the case of Instagram, I was like, I don't think it's good for me to be here anymore. I don't like feeling like I have to work for this company and then not get anything in return. It's become very pay to play. If you don't run ads, you can't get much traffic from outside of your little community, and even your little community isn't going to see what you're doing. And that's for many reasons. Some are kind of necessary because there are so many users and so much content. There has to be a way of sorting it for people, but equally it feels like it never seems to be in my favor. So why stay if I can't get something reciprocal in that instance? And I found since not posting as often, I'm just really enjoying making things on my own that nobody can see, or I'll share it with somebody I know and they're like, wow, that's cool. And that's more interaction than I'd have if I'd paid for an ad, for example. So if it's getting so bad that you can just get more by not being on there, then it's time to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. What ways of connecting with people do you find more valuable? Like what you now say is I then share it with someone which is like more like in person, or maybe send it over to someone which is like quite one-on-one. Is it something, if you say like I really want to pursue like, releasing my art and sharing it with more people, is that a way that's sustainable, or are there other ways that you try to reach people with your music now then?
At the moment, because I'm working on an album and I can't share too much about it, so I'm sharing just within my own friendship group about what I'm planning, or I'll say to you, what do you think of this idea? So I'm in that kind of cocoon stage of only having quite a small circle of people with that. But the answer is I don't really know how I'm going to access listeners or talk to my fans outside of the platforms, because it's been so long since I've had to do that. I do have an email mailing list. I do have a website. I do have all these alternate ways to contact me. But I don't know for sure if it's going to work. I don't know for sure if people are going to follow me where I'm going. I will still have a YouTube channel. I think that's probably the main platform that I'll still be updating to. So it's really scary because I kind of stagnated in terms of growth in the last couple of years, and then it makes you feel like, oh, if I move, will I have even less? But it how much worse does it have to be? You know, sometimes you have to say, well, I can see the trajectory here. It's only going to get worse. So why not do my own thing? Why not move somewhere that I'm happier? Because then I might find people who want to stick around, or maybe everyone will follow me and it'll be fine. I don't know, but I'm willing to take the risk.
Yeah, I gotta say, I got a lot of respect for it because it's basically saying I have no idea how this is going down, but it feels better and it feels like the right thing. And I find that a very beautiful thing. I think especially in social media landscapes, there's a lot of things that are just done because people think that's how things are supposed to go on there. And that's normal to do, or also like that a lot of artists think, oh, I need to be on TikTok if I want to take myself serious as an artist, which is very sad, I think, but understandable, seeing the amount of group pressure around it, but also it seems so normal. So just want to say respect for making that decision, and also for listening to yourself, even though you don't know if that's gonna work out, so to say.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Lucid Letters, for sharing those insights, and maybe also kind of the tools to maybe navigate that and make some of those moves ourselves. Just a little reminder, if you're checking this out and you have a specific highlight that you find really interesting and you think, oh, where do I find the full talk or the full interview with this guest? Make sure to keep an eye on the top of the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, or check out the description if you're listening on an audio platform. I have the links there to all the full interviews with the individual guests. So that's where you can find them. And next, we're gonna check out a part of the talk I had with Nathan Plant. He talked very honestly, about stage fright, how it did show up and still shows up sometimes for him, what it feels like for him, also very important, and how he works with that inner battle instead of fighting it. He has some very interesting ways of channeling that fright and anxiety to show up on stage into actually using it to perform strongly. So let's check out what he has to say about that.
The doubts. I mean, I think anybody who is trying to make their own music, or even especially I think people who studied in a classical sense, know all about the doubts and the self-loathing and the stage fright and all these sort of negative things that come along with it, these sort of psychological and emotional things. I certainly struggled with that a lot, and I think even to this day, I still struggle with it in some sense. Now, making electronic music, trying to put myself out there in this way, the doubts all come back. Like, should I really be doing this? Is what I'm doing really good? Is it really worth it? Yeah, and how did I overcome this? I think just with lots of practice and with lots of performing, and of course I've had mentors in my life that have helped me work through all those doubts. But still, like I said, it felt like there was no other choice, and I have to make this work. And I just kept pushing and pushing, and despite setbacks and performances where I totally bomb, you've got to pick yourself back up and just smile and keep going.
Yeah, that sounds like a strong thing, to just keep swimming, like how Dory would say it from Finding Nemo, I guess. Is there a trick that you, or is there something that works for you to like actually keep going? Because I talk from my own experience in this, but I know with other people I spoke about it as well, like that is quite a difficult thing. Some people said they distract themselves with something else or take a bit of distance from it for a moment, if that works. But I know there's a lot of people that just, because they're so afraid of it, that it becomes like the main thing at the stage, kind of. I don't know, is there something that works nice for you if you have a feeling of like, is this really going to work?
I think one thing that helps me to know is that all artists and musicians go through this. I know there's this documentary about Martha Argerich. I don't know if you know her. She's a pretty famous piano soloist, classical piano soloist, and she's well known for being very nervous and having bad stage fright. And there's this video of her, you can find it on YouTube, where she's sitting in her green room before a concert and saying, "Oh, I don't feel well today. I don't think I can do this today. I don't think I can do this today." And somebody pops their head in, "Oh, Ms. Argerich, it's time to go to the stage." And the camera follows her walking to stage, and the whole time she's saying, "Oh, I can't do this today. And no, I just don't feel right about this today." And until the moment she walks on stage, she's doubting herself and doubting what she can do. And she's one of the greatest living piano players alive, one of the greatest living classical piano players that we have at the moment. And to see her struggle with herself at that age and after such a long career, and in that moment before walking out on stage, somehow that encouraged me to know that even people like her struggle, and she just does it, and she just goes out on stage and does it. You know, I'm a big fan of rehearsing and being very prepared when I go on stage, and I just think to myself, you know what? You know how to do this. You've practiced this 100 times at home. The fact that there are people here doesn't actually change anything. Just do what you do, and trust that the people in the audience are here to see you succeed, and that there's nobody out there that's waiting to see you fail. And so even if you do stumble, just keep going. The audience appreciates that, and they're happy to see it. So get out of your head and just do it. I know it's easy to say, it takes practice, but you somehow just kind of got to believe in yourself, despite everything, even when you don't think you do. And the big motto, I guess, is fake it till you make it. And that's been my key. Pretend you're not nervous. Bring that nervousness. One of my mentors once told me, you know, you keep trying to make that stage fright go away. You're spending so much energy trying to make that feeling go away, but it won't go away. It's going to come with you on stage every time. So welcome it like you would an old friend or a frenemy, maybe even. Like, just bring that nervousness with you on stage and see if you can find a way to channel that energy in a way that builds you up instead of tears you down.
2025 for us was also the year where we started inviting more people outside of music, because we think that all art forms can have strong connections to the natural world and also to activism and protecting this planet. And what showed to me strongly that was the right move is my conversation with Barrett Baumgart. Our conversation moved into how art has a very important role to play in shaping societal perspectives, especially in a time where truth feels very fragile. It became a very honest and deep reflection and conversation about why honest art matters right now, and the interesting insight how what is perceived as truth changed a lot over the past years. It's one of the most valuable parts of the conversation I had with Barrett, and it's something that really sticks with me until today.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that that art can do that, but I don't know. Nothing else. Persuasion, argument, information, nothing else is doing it. I guess my ultimate hope with art, as I've come to see it more over the past couple of years, is that in Tibetan Buddhism, there's this idea of like pointing out, and like I guess technically a spontaneous awakening, profound spiritual awakening can occur when you know, a very profound master offers something called a pointing out instruction, which is literally pointing your awareness towards something you might have overlooked, and suddenly the mind sort of snaps and realizes, kind of in awe, where it is in the whole situation. You know, I don't know how to articulate that quite clearly, but for me, I as I've begun to see and think about it more and more in my sad idealistic world, art is offering a pointing out, you know, potentially pointing towards something that could deliver, you know, maybe not a full awakening, but something similar. I think that's what happened to me when I was reading as a younger person, was just kind of some, you know, that powerful insight. And if there's a way to to harness that, to believe in those insights and translate that into something, a new society or world that isn't built purely around, continual economic growth and individualism. I mean, these things are just not going to be sustainable. So I don't know. It's very idealistic, but I don't know what else could do it other than art. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also find it like a difficult, like it's a tricky thing I feel to balance. I think, just to be clear, like for me, it's not so much like what someone thinks about the topics, but like around COVID, for example, we saw a lot of people that had arguments for not wanting to vaccinate. We had a lot of people that did want to vaccinate, just as an example. And, if then the opinion, how do you say it, like moves a bit too far away from like the safe, well-behaved middle kind of, then either someone is like going nuts and they don't know what they're talking about or whatever. And it's all like a very personal experience of what is like right and what not. And I think that is like a thing that I find pretty difficult. You see it now as well with like teams around like the wars in the Middle East and stuff. Like if someone feels like they found some clarity in the topic, how do you deal with that balance and figuring out if I find that an interesting thing. How do you deal with that? And is it...
That's a whole new, like terrain we're in of just, the facts, truth. Everything, we're in this like post-truth kind of world. Yeah. So to just like every fact is under debate now through social media. And the amount of like weaponization of information and conspiracy theory, and some of these movements that just seem like they would be impossible, like QAnon in the United States, which has led to the election of like Donald Trump and things like that. Hard to believe that people are really supporting this stuff. So if you're going to take, hey, here's the latest like climate findings, like here's what the world's best scientists have concluded. I mean, that should be persuasive to people. It might have been persuasive to many a decade ago, 20 years ago, but where are we at now? I mean, we're in a world that where the most powerful people are actively working toward what fucking end game, I don't know, but they're actively working to undermine all public confidence in any form of specialization, authority in science. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it's fun that you mentioned that. Like that maybe a few decades ago, people would have like got a lot of value out of science because then the doctors were literally recommending to get cigarettes from this and that brand, and that worked because people took that serious. But now if we do expensive and very thorough research on climate matters, then it's fake news. But we can't smoke cigarettes because this doctor says it in this commercial. It's like crazy how we like... Or with the whole AI ChatGPT thing now as well, that people don't take something their doctor said for true, but they ask ChatGPT and they confirm what they are asking because that's just a characteristic of chatbots, that they tend to talk with you, and then they say, yeah, but it says it's true. It's wild indeed. Now that you mentioned that, how that is developing, we'll see how that goes down. Yeah.
I don't know, man. We need something needs to shake out in the next couple of years, but I don't know. I don't know what that is or what it'll be, but we seem to be headed on kind of a pretty dark trajectory with technology and social media.
And now that we're in the corner of writers, storytellers, anyways, Anna Zeeman. She spoke about recognizing your soul journey, the environments we need to truly bloom as human beings, and gentle ways to begin when we want to start following our soul journey. Something I feel we might all benefit from always, but especially in times where there is a lot of not so hopeful news happening in the world around us as well.
That's how I feel is what the true soul journey is about, which is very different from what we create with our minds, because we are constantly in control. We're thinking like, this is the job. I feel safe now. We can plan it in our head. And I think the intuition and soul journey, you can never plan. It's just a calling. And it's, I don't know, it's just, I think it's a full body experience. It's with all of those things. When you know, and when you've experienced it, and when you feel real joy, and when you're with the right person or the right place. And because it feels differently in the body, and you just know, here, that's me, that's the right path. You know what I mean? And the problem with our world is nobody teaches us this. We get taught the opposite. That's the problem. That's when the head comes in. Also for me too. And also the reflection I got from people around me was sometimes incredibly painful, because I'm a person, if someone goes for a dream or the soul journey, I think that's the most beautiful thing you can do. And you should encourage these people with everything you can do. Also, sometimes be realistic, just, help the people create that path. But we created a world where mostly you get like pointed at with a finger, or get judged, or get, said you're a dreamer, or you're naive. But that's what we miss most in the world, the dreamers who have hope in the future, right? I mean,
if there's anyone like listening now that feel like, oh, I have this idea of which direction I would love to go, or, I'm feeling this is pulling, but I don't dare to, maybe because of the reasons you just mentioned, like judgment and those kind of things. For anyone standing at like that threshold, what would you say, and what's the thing that helps to deal with that conflict maybe for you?
Turn the noise out, I would say. It's very simple, but I had to turn out the noise that was bringing me away from my inner voice. And can be very loud, and it can be very hard, because there will be friends who expand you and who drown you in your vision. And you have to be honest to yourself, is that now at the point where I'm expanding me, or is it drowning my vision? And there can come a period or for me it was, or at least to everyone I've talked to, it will come that maybe it gets a little bit silent or isolated, or you feel lonely, just you and your vision, which makes you question a lot of things. But what I've experienced, that it fills up very fast with new people, which are more aligned and more expanding your vision and trusting your vision. That was for me at a point when I felt very isolated in my dream. I started my podcast for only one reason, because I felt I need to connect with the people that are at the same vision where I am. So I started a podcast, and the podcast connected me with so many people around the globe, where I suddenly realized, oh my God, there are so many people out there believing the same vision as I do, working on the same mission as I do. It was just my environment that was not supporting it, So I feel like that's kind of like a very nature thing. You have to be, if you're a plant or a tree or whatever, you have to be in the right environment. And otherwise you cannot grow, So
I like that metaphor a lot. Yeah.
Yes. No, that's
a very strong one. Yeah.
It's simple nature wisdom that we are not like, everything is connected. We're not isolated. So we need people to support us, and we also support others. But if we're at the wrong environment that kind of shrinks us or takes away and not nourishes us, we dry out. So it's the first thing you can do is just, I feel like, really block out the noise and tune into your voice, and then see what it says, and be honest, and trust that there is so many people out there who are at the same level of you with the mission, and they will find you. I think life has incredible ways to show us then that we're not alone, and connects us with the right environment as soon as we allow it to, as soon as we create also a little space.
It's a question that I often like to ask artists and guests in the interviews. Does your work in some way connect to nature, or is it in some way inspired by nature? And what shows it? Well, you can imagine that when Proxevita then shared that she sees her work as an offering to Mother Nature, that made me very excited and want to know more about that. So in our chat, she shared how she offers her music and her art to Mother Earth, but also how nature actually showed back that her music was heard. A very special and magical conversation that made one thing very clear. The world deeply needs art, and nature is listening.
Yeah, so similar to how Proxibita evolved from Mama and kind of being the expression of ecology, because we are nature too. You know, it's not like we are all voices of the earth when we are in that space of that understanding and embodiment. So, you know, it's just like the sense of awareness and tapping in and, you know, becoming like a channel for that as well. Yeah. Yeah. Getting out of the way, getting the ego like out of the way, you know, so that can come through.
Do you remember when you started approaching your music in a way of like offering then rather than in another way? You did
Yeah.
before?
I mean, probably, yeah, with Mama, like I did that. And, you know, I just would take a minute, like as you were playing it, I felt the wind move in. I'm here by the window and I could feel, you know, just a sense of animation even in the environment. And that's exactly the kind of energy that okay, so the other day I was playing one of my newer singles for my mom, you know, before putting it out because it's holidays, you know, we're like with family, you're stateside. So, and I swear one of the trees we had in the dining room where I was playing the song started dancing. No wind, no draft or anything on that plant to make it move. It started dancing. It was like wiggling its leaves. And I was like,
That's so good.
gushing. I was like such a fangirl. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do with the music, you know?
If you're vibing to it, this one's for you.
I couldn't believe it.
That's
That
so
to me was
good.
like, I made it.
Yeah,
You know, the plants are
Yeah.
dancing with me. Like,
that's so good. Yeah, that's a milestone reached.
yeah,
Did you have that with your other music as well before? Or was it like a first that it felt like such a special moment and
yeah, I think it's something we've always have had since we're younger, but we just kind of have to tap back into it, right? So,
Mm, yeah, like also in line with the play, right? Like taking things light, you mean then? And like taking things joyful and running around like you mentioned earlier as a kid that you're just flying and like
yes,
enjoying, you know, the oddities and the weird stuff as well.
listening instead of just being like, ah, you know, like taking a moment and being calm and like receiving it more. Like sometimes that is the offering, like trying to try as much as just being and, you know, yeah, being in resonance and being connected there.
That's yeah, beautiful. I guess that took some time and some crashes to figure out as well, or not,
Well, a little
or
bit,
is that just me?
you know, and then you're like, oh, out of the way.
Yeah, yeah, that
Simple,
makes
not
sense.
simple, right? It's simple, not simple. It's just like, because that's what sure is so important because it's like that space between like making it okay. This is why I think artists have such a responsibility, um, which gets challenging because it's like, oh my gosh, the world needs art. Like we need these cultural shifts. We need it to be okay to be. Like we need to make it okay to just exist and have that be
Yeah,
like peaceful and joyful and you know the things that life is meant to be because we have so much more to us.
now we finished the highlights with also the final interview of the past year. My talk with Lily Schwartz, also known as Polar Coaster. That conversation took such an interesting turn because we were talking about how the pandemic reshaped our sense of what truly matters in our lives and how it left many people feel very alienated. For Lily, for example, those feelings haven't fully passed yet, and she is still living with the consequences and the thoughts of the pandemic, even though it to many people might feel like it's over. It was truly fascinating and interesting to hear how for some people this is influencing their lives ever after still. and also to hear how it shaped art and the perspectives of how some things are important in life and others seems to be not. She reflected that all on an incredibly honest and human level, and that's why I would love to finish our highlights with that. So thank you for sharing that, Lily.
I think the pandemic changed a lot of people's minds in the respect that suddenly a lot of people weren't feeling useful anymore, and their jobs didn't really have the same meaning as before. So if you think about what's really relevant, what's really important and in your life and how you want to spend your life, a lot of people have realized that what we were doing before the pandemic was not really the right thing to do. And I see a lot of that where people have changed jobs or completely turned their lives upside down through what happened.
Yeah. Did it change a lot for you personally, like the pandemic and how you look on what things are important in life?
I was already not in this grind that most people experience with capitalism anyway. I was already doing already doing creative stuff before, so it didn't really feel like much changed. And I have to say that for a little moment at the beginning of the pandemic, I actually had more social contact than before the pandemic, if that makes sense. Not in person, obviously, but since I live abroad and away from a lot of my friends, there were these moments where they weren't so tech savvy that they would know how to use video chat or whatever. And I wouldn't have that much contact with them. And suddenly everyone knew how to use video chat and so on. I suddenly had I was playing games with friends and online games, and they wouldn't have had the time before. And for a little while, I actually felt like I had more of a social life than before because I live abroad, and in this place, the people are kind of closed, and it's very hard to make friends, and so I don't really have many friends here, and I spend a lot of my time just on my own taking pictures. So it just the 3D relationships, those kind of suffered.
But I recognize what you say, that it did that. Like the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like first there was the hoarding toilet paper and things like that, because that's the problems we can imagine. But then there was this period of people were scared because the scale seemed so huge, and there were all these images of people walking in white suits, and all of a sudden it seemed like people were like, I need to stay in contact with the people I care about because this can be really, I don't know, dangerous, big, whatever. And then it lasted for a while. At least that was the case here in the Netherlands. And then you saw more and more protests, and people started missing their relevant or irrelevant things in life. And then, there was more and more polarization, I feel, with two sides almost that shaped a bit in the whole discussion, that it almost became, at least here, not nice to talk to people about the topic because it could go two ways or something. Bit weird how that developed here, I feel.
Yeah, I felt it was the same here and in Germany too. And there was a lot of talk about freedom, but it was this weird individualistic sense of freedom. I mean, freedom ends where you hurt other people, right? Normally. With normal people, it ends there. But in this case, it didn't end there, and it was just me and my needs, and people were prioritizing that and didn't really think that far ahead. Also, and that was completely different in other countries. We happened to watch a lot of a channel, a YouTube channel in China called Javierzo. There's a Spanish guy who is married to a Chinese woman, and they were in Wuhan when it started. So we followed it from the beginning, and we knew that it was happening before people in the West even realized that it was happening. And there it was they had a completely different attitude towards it. They had this zero COVID restrictions where they really clamped down on everything. And they managed to keep the numbers really far down, and it showed what would have been possible if they hadn't prioritized profit in the West. Yeah, that really was eye-opening in the sense that it was such a different way of dealing with it. And in the West, it seemed more like everyone was prioritizing their individual freedoms over everyone else's needs and so on. I found that very alienating, also because I heard things like that, the calls for letting people die to reopen businesses. I heard that not just from people who you'd think, yeah, you would expect them to talk like that. No, I heard that from friends, and then I say things like, I'm risk group, right? What you're saying is kind of crazy, and they would just not make the connection of that this is happening to real people in some way. Yeah, it was very disconcerting because it made such a big difference in how I related to certain people who were just inconsiderate in that sense.
Right. So now that we did our look back on the past year, 2025, I'm really excited to look forward a little bit into 2026. And here are a few things that we are really excited about to build and share and work on together this year. So the first thing, which I'm extremely excited about because I think it's my favorite part of the whole project at the moment, is that we're aiming to share significantly more interviews. So first we were aiming to do 1 interview a month. Now we kind of got to that with 11 interviews over the past year, but the upcoming year, or this year, 2026, we're aiming to share interviews every other week. So we're hoping to do at least 24 interviews in 2026. Really excited for that. Another thing that we're looking to build in 2026 is somewhat of a hot takes series where we're diving a bit deeper into topics that matter to earth-loving artists, to creatives, and also to you as a listener. Not with the idea to amplify negativity or struggles in the scene and in the industry and around the planet, but actually to start conversations and also to figure out and learn from each other ways to keep hope, but also to find constructive ways to approach things. We trialed that a little bit on the socials with the leaving Spotify topic, for example. And we don't want to share those things with the idea of like, boo, everything is bad, but we want to create a tool set or like a checklist or things like that for people that do want to leave Spotify because they're not the most ethical company out there. So we basically want to help people and give them the tools to navigate away from that. And yeah, we need some time to figure that out. We are also still working on that concept. So if you're listening and you have ideas on topics or on ways that we could approach that, or maybe you have some questions on topics that you're struggling with, just leave them in the comments, because then we can build something that's truly helping and that's valuable for you as well as a listener. So let us know for sure, but we're really excited to move a bit more in that in depth. And yeah, that brings me also to maybe the most important thing that we're excited for building this year, and that's investing more into building our community into a way that it involves you more directly in shaping what Aliens Love Earth becomes next. Because the platform isn't just about us talking, it's most importantly about us listening and finding ways together to shape this community into a bigger platform where earth-loving creatives and artists can share their work, but also for you as a listener and an enjoyer of the art to feel connected to those artists, to the planet. And yeah, we're looking for ways to build that together with you. So more about that, but that's in rough lines some of the things that we're really excited for building this year. Now, as I mentioned already in the intro, there is one more thing that I really want to share with you in this episode, and that is our impact. And that's the impact we created together. We are calling ourselves the platform that heals the earth with art. So we also gotta practice what we preach. And We actually do, because last year, thanks to everyone who followed, subscribed, but also listened, shared, commented, and all those things, we gained over the past year 439 new followers. Now, that's far more than one person a day joining this movement of healing the earth with art. And that makes me super excited and also thankful. And as you know, for every new follower, we help restore 1 square meter of ecosystem where it matters most. So if you do the math, that means 439 square meters of ecosystem restoration supported, thanks to you. But for the past year, we decided to do something special. And that special thing is that we are doubling that impact and then rounding it up, which means that together, we're starting this new year by supporting the restoration of 1,000 square meters of ecosystem. 1,000 square meters, and that's not abstract. That's real land, that's real habitat, that's actual life that's being supported there, not only for plants and trees, but also for animals that inhabit those, but also for the communities of humans that live around there. Like the last restoration round when we supported a project in Mozambique. To simplify what they do, they pay the people that live around those ecosystems for restoring it. The people get paid, they can use that money to send kids to school. The things that are restored, for example, are mangroves that cover the coast, so that if there's tidal waves or high tides incoming, it will protect the villages from not being disturbed by climate change that much. And it restores ecosystems, so it restores biodiversity and things like that. So it's really a win-win-win situation. And that all happened because of you as well. So thank you so much for joining us and for supporting this mission. And if you're still here and listening, and if you haven't yet, then please follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening, because as you just heard, it really helps. Every new follower is 1 square meter of ecosystem in our next investment round. And what also really helps is if you could leave a comment, like this video, rate the podcast on your podcast platform, or maybe share the episode with a friend or family member who loves deep conversations, creativity, and most importantly, this planet we call home. Now, thank you all so much for being part of Aliens Love Earth. We're really excited for this new year. So here's to a new year of art, connection, and healing Mother Earth together. I hope you have a fabulous day, and I'll catch you next week. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.